arachnophobia.
Florida man attempts to leave store with chainsaw stuffed down his pants.
Florida man attacks nephew over undercooked noodles.
Florida man tattoos black widow spider on his face to combat arachnophobia.
Florida man attempts to leave store with chainsaw stuffed down his pants. And those are the kinds of things that we only see in Florida.
I'm Grace.
I'm Grace.
And I'm Grace from Steinbrenner High School, and today we are going to be talking about Florida and how much of a wildcard kind of state it is.
As we all know, Florida is crazy and is super divided on all sorts of issues, especially politically.
Florida is so diverse, since there is such a wide range of ages, and the sheer size of the state means that the different ends of the state will have super different cultures.
Because of this diversity, the political party percentages in Florida are often very close, making Florida a swing state.
In the 2018 Florida primary elections, 34.3% voted for the winning Democratic candidate and 56.6% voted for the winning Republican candidate for Florida governor.
Although this is evident all across the state, we see this strong political divide even in our own school.
Last April, we had our school walkout to protest gun violence, and there was a mixed reaction from students.
While there was a lot of support from the school community, there were also some unexpected protesters that attended.
That was one of the most prominent examples of this divide at our school.
At the walkout, there were a lot of kids who came in support of the Second Amendment, which was not the original intent of the protest itself. And they came with wristbands and posters, and I thought that this showed that there are a lot of people on both sides who are not willing to hear the other side and just want to say their opinion. And I feel like that's an important part of politics, is hearing the other side, even if it's not something that you necessarily agree with, because it could give you a new perspective on the issue at hand.
It does show an interesting side, though, that the anti-protesters showed up, because it shows how students on both sides are using their voice, and that's something that's really important for politics to work the way that they do, is both sides really making their voices heard, even with students as young as in high school.
Yeah, I think that this issue of gun violence is really prevalent in our generation and in our schools because it's something that is directly affecting kids, and they actually have to care about it because it's something that could eventually happen in the future and they need to be worried about. So this is something that was really big for our school.
I think that this is a lot of kids' first introduction and really getting involved into politics, and maybe that's why they don't understand how to go about it, and maybe that's why the kids at the protest weren't exactly the most respectful to each other. But I think that it could be a good step in the right direction to getting them involved and maybe getting them to vote in the future.
Another issue in our school system is the discrimination against LGBT kids in particular. It's not as prevalent as gun control, but it's still something that is a big part because there is a big population of our school that is LGBT that is very underrepresented.
A lot of children in the hallways will say mean things to their friends, maybe use slurs, and although this might not actually reflect their true beliefs, they want to say these things to their friends to maybe sound cooler or to fit in, and maybe they're trying to please their parents, maybe they have a different view, and it's all just about how they want to be perceived a certain way, and that may not be how they actually feel on the inside.
Something else that this does that could be problematic is that when students say these kinds of things that they don't really even mean, they just say it to be cool, when they say it to students who actually feel this way, it perpetuates the hate and fuels them up when the person saying it doesn't even really feel that way. And this can cause a stronger divide between the two groups.
We have a GSA at our school, but a lot of LGBT kids are scared to join because either they're not fully out or they don't want their friends to know that they're in the club because it's seen as not a cool thing to be in.
In our schools as well, there's the issue that a lot of kids and teachers bring up about kids expressing PDA in the hallways and in classrooms and at lunch. And a lot of teachers might not actually have a problem with straight couples doing this, but when it comes to LGBT students, they say that that's not allowed and that there's a strict policy at the school when it's not enforced with straight couples at all.
There's also a lot of LGBT presence at the school, but a lot of the time it's censored. And a lot of the time it's really censored by teachers. Like, for example, we'll be reading a book by a gay author or someone that talks about coming out in their novel or something like that, but it's not brought up as a main theme point because it's insensitive towards people that have a different view.
I think a big part of this is that they don't want to be offensive, and they're so afraid of talking about these issues because they don't want to offend anyone. But I think part of the discussion process is hearing seeing representation.
While there's a lot of support in Florida for being LGBT, there's also a lot of hate crime and people who are very against it. This is really the most prevalent example of this was the Pulse nightclub shooting.
This happened in 2016, which is kind of when a lot of violence was starting to happen around the world. And I think that this is when the two issues were really brought into the spotlight, and now there's so much controversy around both, and it's causing kids to get involved because they hear their parents talking about it, and they want to have their voices be heard as well.
Even though we notice a strong divide in our own school, in a lot of ways it's a positive thing. It means that students are starting to make an effort to get more involved in politics and actually caring about issues even when they can't vote yet.
If more students become registered to vote, once they turn 18, they will be able to actively engage themselves in politics that they have educated themselves on for years.
They will also be able to put candidates in place that reflect their own personal views. It's a vital part of our democracy that a diverse group of people vote every year so that we have the candidates that truly represent the people.
Although it is still an issue, kids are starting to think for themselves in large numbers, and not just only listening to what their parents' political beliefs are. That might be why issues of LGBT discrimination are starting to improve, although they are still prominent, which of course means some people are still listening to their parents while others may just hold these beliefs themselves and think for themselves.
As you start to get older, and as you go through high school, you start to feel more affected by the issues in our society and in our state of Florida. And I think that's why it's so important to start caring about politics at a young age, because you get this knowledge about what's going on around you before you actually have to make big decisions like voting. But it can be really important because once you get that opportunity, you know where you stand and you have the opportunity to make your voice heard.
One of the big pushes that came from student activists after the Parkland shooting was getting people pre-registered to vote and just trying to get as many people registered to vote so that their voices can be heard. And they're really shining a light on the value of voting in our country.
A lot of kids, when they have gotten their driver's license, have pre-registered themselves to vote. And like Grace just said, they have been going around and registering kids to vote at all sorts of events around cities, and just any time that kids get the opportunity, they are trying to get themselves involved.
I've also seen that kids in our school that are very politically active and are really actually working towards getting issues solved are the ones that are pre-registering to vote because they know how important it is in our society to make their opinions heard.
So many issues in politics, such as gun control and LGBTQ+ rights, have a large impact on society's youth, it's important for them to know exactly what policies are being put in place and which politicians support their same views.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, and remember to get out there and vote because your voice matters.